all have to meet online. Um, well, we hope that everyone is safe at home, and we're really sorry for not being able to organize some of these meetups in the last couple of months. But we were hoping that the situation could improve so we could resume our face-to-face meetups, and I guess that's not going to happen anytime soon. So this is going to be the way that we're going to meet up from now on, and maybe we will just going to keep that going, even if things improve, right? If things get a little bit better. One thing that's really interesting is to see how many that we have good audience today. Probably even more than we would usually have when we do or on or the personal meetups. I guess that the time is also a good thing because it's quite early. That was also done on purpose, so we can probably have some more people to join instead of just doing that after hours. So that's like a good change as well. So let's see how that goes. Um, Anyway, so I probably forgot to introduce myself. For people that don't know me, I'm Roberto. I've been leading the Coimbra Jug with my colleague Bruno over there. And we're also trying to make this joint initiative with other jugs that we have here in Portugal. So there's Daniel and Paulo, which are leading the Lisbon Jug, and also Samuel that leads the PT Jug. So probably um, there's not much point in having like these regional names for the meetups or for the jugs because since everything's online, anyone can join from any place. So most likely we're just going to try to do all these joint meetups all together without any regional meeting. But since the Coimbra jug was the one that's supporting other things, that's the one that we're using right now. So I have a couple of other announcements before going to the session. If you know Generation Conference, so we're going to return this year from 2021. Again, it's going to be an online conference. And while we're still trying to find some of the speakers to come and talk to us, we don't have anyone to announce yet, but I think you can expect a good program like we had the last couple of years. You can schedule on your calendar June 16. That's where we're going to have our generation conference this year. So just go to our website so you can be up to date to anything around Generation. So go to generation.pt and feel free to send us any comment. And of course, if you actually want to speak at the conference, feel free to submit. So we also open the call for proposals. We're really happy to receive any of your sessions that you want to present over there, and see you in the conference, right? So without any further delay, I'm just gonna start the session for today. Um, we are maybe we're like 60 people over here, so quite a few. But I like to make my sessions as most interactive as possible. So feel free to interrupt me and ask me anything at any time. I believe that you're able to unmute yourself and talk. So if there's anything that you'd like to ask, feel free to do it. So uh, this session is a little bit talking about this session directly. So I like to call this, do you know these libraries? And a little bit different from previous sessions that I made in the past. I have no slides at all. Everything that I'm going to show is live coding and everything's going to be on the IDE. The idea is that I'm going to show you like pieces of code. Maybe you already know a lot of them. Maybe you don't know all of them. But the idea with this session is over the last few years, I've been developing applications and I've been maybe like most of you, of course. And I just felt into a position where I always included like this set of dependencies in all of my projects because I thought that they were really worthwhile to add. I felt that they were just increasing my productivity, and they were a really nice asset to add to any project. So talking with some of other colleagues, and I say, hey, I'm using this, I'm using that, and that's when sometimes you actually learn about stuff. I came with this idea of coming up with this session to show some of the things that I like to include in my projects, and hopefully these are going to help all of you to be more productive, or even if you already know some of them, at least maybe you can learn a couple of tricks. So let me go and share my screen. So here we go. We don't need this one. Okay, so let me put this in presentation mode. Can you see this properly?
Yep.
Okay, so okay, let me start with the first one that I want to show. So one of the first libraries that I usually include in one of my projects is something called Project Lombok. Probably some of you already heard about that. Maybe some of you haven't. But Project Lombok is to go into further details, it's an annotation processor that does a lot of magic behind the scenes that generates bytecode for you. It generates all kinds of bytecode, and you can do that by just annotating your classes with some particular Lombok annotations. And if you look in this particular example where you have this Pojo, which is a book, you can see that usually when you have your own Pojo, you end up having, and you're writing Java, right? Java is like a very expressive language, and it has a lot of boilerplate. You end up writing like things like getters, setters, constructors, equals, hash codes to string, unless you're doing Kotlin, of course. But we don't like Kotlin here, just a joke. Anyway, you can use some of these annotations to generate these for you. And so now if you look into this import section, you'll see that I'm importing things like Lombok, Builder, Lombok data, and a few others. So the idea here is I can use Lombok data to generate getters and setters, equals, toString and hash code. So if I go here to one of my tests, so I wrote also tests for these. So one of the things that you can also like to do is this project that I'm going to show you, it's completely open source. It's on GitHub. So after the presentation, just can pick that up and play with it. And you can, of course, put some pull requests and help me out do some other stuff. So as you can see, if I run this test, right, I'm able to just have a builder over there. But if let me just actually start something fresh. So let me do like a book builder for now. And this actually is coming from that builder annotation that I just have. But if you look over here, if I do like build.get, see you have all the getters automatically that Lombok gives to me just by setting this annotation, right? This builder annotation is the one that I was using just now. So if you want to have like a fluent builder, you can just create your own constructor and call to builder. So the idea over here is you don't really require this constructor. I just added because I want to exclude the ID from my constructor, because let's just say that the ID is auto-generated and I don't want it over here. So I don't want people to mess with it. So in that particular case, I'll just create a specific constructor and add a builder over there. If not, I could just add like a builder right here, and then it will use the old Xerox constructor, something like that, and it will just do a builder for everything. There are a lot of things that you can play with here on the annotations at the Pojo level. Now, sometimes you may not completely understand what Lombok is doing, and that's perfectly fine, or maybe not. But one trick that you can use over here is if you're using IntelliJ, and I believe that that's also true for other IDEs like Eclipse and NetBeans, you can definitely go over here and go to some of these options, say code. So go refactor, and you can say dlombok, and you can call dlombok data, and then you'll see exactly what Lombok just generated for you, right? And at least you'll have like a rough idea on what's happening behind the scenes. So we're just gonna remove that for now. And yes, I mean, Lombok has a lot of other annotations that you can use. So just try to have a look. So they have like a very good documentation. So let's just download sources over there. So data is actually like a shorthand for all of these annotations. So if you just want getters, you can just getter. If you just want to string, you can just do a to string. And if you want to equals hash code, just equals an hash code. That's fine. Even those annotations they have, not sure about data. Well, they have like, you can say like a static constructor over there. But they have like plenty of options that you can use. So it's very configurable. Now, Lombok has a couple of other annotations that I like to use, not only around the Pojo level. So let's look here on this API. So let's just imagine that you have your own service and you want to delegate to it in some way. So you can use just a delegate annotation. It will just generate all the delegation code to whatever delegate that you put over there. So if I look into my test again, and I can just come over here and create something. Let's see. So this is like book API. I'm delegating to book service, right? So book service, if I look, it has these like create book, validate author, and a couple other things. So if I just go new book API, then you'll see that I have like the method create book, and also I'll validate, probably it's private. I'm not sure. Yeah, validate is private. So that actually works only for public methods. But again, so I just delegated all these methods to the book service on the book API, and I didn't have to expose that one method like that. Now, other things that are like interesting for services is if you look to my service over here, you see that I also have like a log annotation, right? So remember that all the time you have to come over here and say like public static, well, not like that, public static log. So log and then log, whatever, right? So you can just have like a nice let log annotation over there, and that's actually using Java util logging. But if you want log4j, you can use log4j. If you want log4j2, you can use log4j2, and this will generate like loggers with the actual factory for any kind of these logger implementations. So then I can just call log here. So that's completely fine. And one interesting feature over here is, so let me just remove these sneaky throws over there. And so remember, when every time that you want to call a method and that actually has like an exception that you have to try catch, so it's like super annoying, right? So you can have to come over here. So in that particular case, my validate outer throws a validation exception that's not a runtime exception. So I have to catch it up and do it like that. Well, Lombok allows me to do like some pretty crazy stuff. So I can just come over here and say, hey, I want these to be like a sneaky throws, and it will handle these like it was like a runtime exception. So I don't have to try and catch it. So again, if I go to my API class and well, I try to run this one, and then everything should be fine, right? So I'm able to run. I don't have to try catch up that exception, but I do get my exception back over here. This was as a null pointer because in this particular case, it's giving null pointer over here. If I do that one, then I'll get my validation exception just fine. And that's okay. So Lombok has a lot of other annotation that you might like to do. You may like to explore. So just have a look and see if that helps you. Does anyone have any question that likes to ask about Lombok?
Yes, Roberto. Could you please repeat the explanation on the delegate option?
Okay, delegate. So let me come to delegate again. So let's just say that you want to expose a couple of methods from a particular service, right? So usually what you will do over here is you'll just remove delegate, right? And what you will do is you can just generate the delegate method directly over here. right? And in this particular case, what you're doing is I
Got
want
it.
to,
Got it. Yeah.
yeah, I want to
Nice.
delegate the method to book service from my book API, right? So with delegate, what you can do is you don't have to actually write that method and just to delegate, and that will be written for you automatically.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about Lombok?
Yes, just one. Is it possible to customize any of these generated codes if you really need it?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, if you look into the annotations parameters, you're able to do a lot of stuff. So you can see, if you go to string, you can see that you can exclude some fields from the string, right? Or you can say, I want to like go off of this, and it will just do include these ones that you have over there, right? So if you do, for instance, on getter, you'll say that you want these to be lazy. So basically to only uh, set up the getter annotation when you actually first call that. So you're not able to write behavior unless you like do unless you go and extend Lombok. That's also a possibility.
Okay.
But the most common cases are already captured on the annotations metadata that you can use to put over there, right? So even if you look again for like the null article structure, you can say what's the static name for this. So instead of like being you can say like book like that, and you can say that the access level it's private, right? So if I come here and try to on this book over here, so if I now start to try to call the static method, it's not even here because that's private. So hopefully if I change that to public and I come over there, then I have the public static over there, right? And I was able to just do that by changing the name. The annotation visibility. But again, here, if I come over there and say, so let me actually, X. So one drawback, as you can see over here, if I just change stuff like this, then it won't change directly into all of your code. You have to do like a find and replace. But you're able to do to customize it like that. So I'm not sure if that's enough for you.
Yes, I was more thinking on this extension possibility, but it seems that if it's possible, it's fine. Both situations, the configurable way and the extension possibility as well, both are interesting on this library.
Yeah, so I heard that some people also extend Lombok to add their own thing. So Lombok is only just an annotation processor that works at compiler level and picks up all these annotations and generates the code for you. So it's only a matter of creating your own annotation processor and create your own annotations, or just piggyback on Lombok annotation and do some other stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah. Do you have any experience on peer code review using Lombok?
Not sure if I quite understand the question, but what you meant is there anything when I'm reviewing code, if I look into the Lombok annotations, and maybe I just recommend something else?
I'm imagining myself making a review on like via Garrett or something like that.
Hmm.
And I see a bunch of annotations and I have no clue that what code is being generated. So, and if things will match or not.
Well, I mean, the Lombok annotations are pretty explanatory, right? So probably the question I will ask back to you is, will you review the getters and setters from a Pojo class?
Well, but it's not only Pojos, right? It's also services and
Yes,
delegations.
yes,
And
for
so on.
sure. So the most common cases is just use them on pojos for getters and setters. Of course, there are other things like these, like with like delegate, right? But I understand where you're coming from, and that's definitely a concern. Also, when I'm reviewing some code, I look into the tests, right? So as long as the business requirements are being met and things are passing, I think we're mostly okay. So one of the things that is good about Lombok is it started like as a very small project, maybe like 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. But right now it has like big community and big usages. So if you go into their GitHub repo, they have a lot of people reporting issues. They have a lot of people pulling pull requests. So I'm pretty confident on the code that Lombok is generating, right? So I wouldn't be too much concerned if Lombok is generating the right things, because if it's not, usually it's detected very early, and that fix is it's done pretty quick as well. I hope that helps.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay, so I'll move to some other library that I like to use. So this is actually one interesting that complements Lombok a little bit, and this one is called Mapstruct. So again, so in this particular case, I'm still using the book, but I'm not using any Lombok annotations right now, just for you to see the difference. But you can definitely combine both Lombok and Mapstruct. So one thing that actually happens a lot in our project is we have to copy objects from side to side, either because you have like a REST endpoint and you want to convert that in some kind of a database object, or you just want to copy objects from place to place. So Mapstruct is for me, it's one of the perfect libraries to do that kind of work. And in this particular case, what I have here is I have a book entity over here. Well, it's not an entity, but it's just like a Pojo. Doesn't really matter. And I have this book read class, which if you look is very similar. But actually, it's probably using the same things, but just say this book read is the one that I'm using on my REST endpoints, and I don't want to overflow and expose my database. So I'm using like a different Pojo for that. And that's great for design, but then it's not so great when you're coding, because now you have to copy stuff from side to side. Well, what I can do over here is I can just create these nice interface, annotated something called a mapper, which is an annotation coming from Mapstruct. And then I'll just go over here and say, hey, I want to create a method called toBookRead. Doesn't really, the method name doesn't really matter. It can be anything that you like. But what matters is actually the types that you want to put over there. So when you have a method that has a source and a target type, model mapper will just look into that and try to convert one object into another. So in this particular case, what's going to happen over here on this toBookRead is model mapper is going to look into this and is going to generate the code to create a book read from a book. And the opposite is also true. So you can do a couple of other fancy stuff, right? So in this other particular case, when I say like toBook, is I want to create a book from a source book, but instead I just want to map it to this target. And for instance, I want to ignore the ID. Now, before actually showing the tests, or actually I can run the test first. So let me run this. As you can see, I don't really have any fancy framework over here. The book is just have like this instance method to call the instance of the book mapper. And you might be asking where the implementation is. So I'm just going to show you that really quick. But now if you look over here, so I create my book, I set like a couple of fields over there. And then I just say, hey, I want to like a book copy. I set the ID to 2, and then I call like toBook, right? And now you'll see that the book that I have over here, I just changed the ID and just keeps everything from from the initial book. So it means that actually copy everything that I have. Now, if you want to look into the implementation, and that's one of the things that I like about about Mapstruct is other libraries that do copy, like Dozer or Model Mapper or even Spring Beans, they use reflection, right? So, but Mapstruct, it actually generates a POJO with all the code that you have. So this is actually everything that was generated at compile time, again, using an annotation processor by the compiler. So that means that for me, there are like two added benefits. One, it's way faster than any other mapping library because this is just code. There's no reflection involved. And second, you can put breakpoints over here and see what's actually happening, right? And when you're doing reflection, well, you can put some breakpoints in between, but it's not really that great, and it's quite difficult to do. And third, there's even like a third option, which is no one's stopping you over here to come and implement your own default method and actually write some code, right? So like a default book read to book read default doesn't really matter. Right, and you just implement your own method and you just write your own code if you like to do something more manual. So these are a few reasons why I like Mapstruct, because it gives you a lot of flexibility. It generates the code, you're able to do breakpoints around it, and you can write your own mapping method if you like directly on the interface. So for me, it's worked very well. Any questions about Mapstruct?
Yeah. Roberto.
Yeah.
I'm Paulo. Can you also give an example if we have a list of books?
Yeah,
instead
I mean,
of just a book?
it's the same, right? So you'll just do a list like that. And so let me actually write that one, and I'll let Model Mapper generate that code for you. So list. So let that book read, doesn't really matter. So let me just do like a quick compile over here.
Yeah, it's interesting because we really don't have to iterate over the list, check if the list is null and so on.
So
now everything.
So now you see this is the implementation that Mapstruct just generated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as you can see, it's actually quite smart that it not only creates a list, but also calls the other method that does the mapping for each single entity.
Yeah,
so that was like a very interesting question. So yes, so Mapstruct does do mapping for collection types as well, automatically. So if you want to do things like that, you'll just add a method for a list or for a collection or whatever, and then Mapstruct will just generate that for you as well.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Anything else about Mapstruct? Okay, so I'll move on to something else. A couple of other things that I like to include is so let me actually show you freeze here on the palm. So these are quite some old projects. So probably all of you have heard about the Apache Commons projects, and sometimes you might be using them or not. I use them a lot, so I think they're like a great addition, even though if they're quite old. Old doesn't mean that they're outdated, it just means that they're very stable, and people haven't come up with better alternatives. And actually we see that some things were actually pushes to the latest JDK versions, but I think they still give a lot of interesting things for us to use. So one that's definitely a must is the string utils class. So my pain point about with the JDK is that if you want to do like things like I want to check if the name is blank. Well, yes, I have a dot is blank in the string, but unfortunately, it will just return a null pointer exception if the name is null, right? So yeah, I have like a set throws over there, but of course, if name is null, you know that it's gonna throw a null pointer exception. Well, but with string utils, because it inverts things a little bit, right? So you're now able to just pass the string over there directly, right? And then is blank will just test again if that's null, and if blank, and if it has white spaces, so test about a lot of other things. So for me, it's just like a very small API change, but which is usually better than just having to, oh, I want to test it, so I have to test if this is null first, then I have to go and test if this is blank. So you can just go and if I show you here the implementation of this, you'll see. So the length will just test if that is null. So you don't have to worry about that. Well, of course, I'm not just going to include string utils because of this, but string if you explore the string utils class from Commons Lang, you'll see there's a bunch of API that the regular thing from JDK doesn't have. So I'm not going to go in all of them. So usually I just try to raise awareness on that. So I'll let you to discover and to explore. Just go and check, and usually what I like to do is just do a dot and try to look into all these method names and see if I find in some occasions I just found methods that are implemented over here that I have to implement myself, and then I just felt stupid because, oh, that was here and I could just use that instead of being trying to reinvent the wheel. So a couple other things over here. So a lot of people like tuples, right? Unfortunately, we still don't have any tuple into the JDK. There has been a lot of ask for that. Well, some people have been using point from a DBT or for swing, which is like a pain. But if you use Commons Lang, you can just use a pair. So that's a tuple right there. Or if you want to use a triple, you can use that as well. So you have a triple of A, B, and C, or a pair of A and B. Another way to do it, instead of using the point in the DBT, is just using a map entry, which is a sort of a tuple in JDK, but that's just like cheating around our way. But anyway, if you want real tuples, then you can just use that one. And of course, if you go and do like pair, you'll see, yes, you have the get value and get key, but you also have the get right and get left. And for triple, of course, you have get right, get left, and get center. So those are actually a couple of, well, not center, sorry, it's middle. Some interesting classes that you can use if you want to use tuples. Another thing that I like on Commons Lang is this lazy class. So in this particular case, let's just say that you have like a very expensive object to create, right? And you don't want to incur on the expensive method call, right? So in this, so if you look in here, I have this expensive object, and on the constructor, you'll see that I have like a sleep here of 5 seconds. So of course, if I call that one like that, so it's just going to take some time because I'm calling the constructor. But if you're using the lazy wrapper from Commons Lang, you can just say, hey, I want to have like these lazy expensive object. You just set the type from these expensive object over there. And now I can just create my reference directly, and I can just choose when I'm going to initialize it, right? That's when I call initialize. So that allows me to actually have a reference to the object and play with it around and pass it around, but it lets me choose when I'm going to initialize. So, well, that's what lazy is all about. And even if you want to have like lazy object, you probably have to, if you have to do that yourself, maybe you have to write your own code for that. Which is not very very easy, right? If I show you the lazy initialization, right, you have to play about the synchronized blocks, right? Because you might have like concurrent threads, right, to access that object, and the lazy initializer already handles all of that complexity for you. So you should just use it, and then you can just initialize the object whenever you want. Couple other things about common slang. So if you like if you have to use reflection, the reflection API is there. It's not really that hard to use it, but still has a couple of um, well, it's not really user friendly to use, right? So for instance, this particular case I'm using on the first code section, I'm using the reflection API from the JK itself, right? So in this case, I want to create a user object. I have this user object created over here, first name, last name, and I want to set up the first name. So if I want to use reflection, I will use something like, okay, I want to declare a field first name, and then I have to set accessible to true because that's private, and then I have to call set, and then I have to do a try catch. Well, with the reflection utils from common slang, you can just put that on like a single method, and it will just say like field utils, right field. You pass in the user object, what the field that you want to put, the value, and I don't remember what it is. I think that's for private fields. Yes, the force access, and yes, you still have to do like a try catch, but at least it's a little bit more nicer to use. And well, that of course works. This kind of covers common slang. So the next one that I'll show you is like the commons IO. So a lot of the projects that we work, of course, have to handle files, which are like quite a pain to deal with. The latest files and pads APIs, when they introduce the NIO APIs, they quite improve that. But still, I believe there are other things a little bit better here on Commons IO. So in this particular case, right? So as you can see, I'm trying to create like an input stream from a string text, which is quite nice. And then I want to just copy that to a file, so I can just put like that input stream and say get file, and generate the names.txt directly. Now, things where this really shines is, so if I want to like collect a couple of files from a directory, I can do like these file utils, and I say like list files, put in the file directory path, and I can pass in a couple of filters over here. So it accepts a file data name, so you can use for all kinds of crazy things like filter by name, filter by directories, and you can even extend that to put some additional things. So it's quite convenient. So in here I'm just doing a filter by the extension, which is a text file. And so if I'm trying to do this like using the regular API, you'll probably do something like, okay, file, yes, file input stream, right? And do like a new file input stream, and use as a file, and then you have to create like a buffer reader to read the file. So that's like a pain. So you see in here, I just do like a more direct approach. So I just create the file input stream by file utils and say, hey, open this input stream from this file. And then the actual IO utils has this line iterator that allows me to, instead of using a buffer reader or buffer line reader, as this line iterator, I'll just iterate the line from that file as a iterator right here, which is quite convenient. And that's it. So the last couple of lines, they're probably not that useful anymore ever since they introduced the tribal resources. But in cases where you're not able to use tribal resources because old JDK version, or you have the separate definitions around your method, instead of doing like the try catch and finally, you can just do IO utils close quietly, and you pass in whatever auto-closable resource you have, and it will just close that for you. So instead of you having to call close and wrap that up into a try finally, so that's also a little bit convenient. Finally, into the Apache Commons things, another thing that I like is the collections API. So they have this bag thing. So the bag is actually allows you to have this thing called hash bag, right? So in this particular hash bag, I'll say that I want like 2 items of Naruto and like 3 items of Uzumaki. So in the end, I'll have my collection or my bag is like 5 size, and then I can just say I want to count as many Narutos that I have or as many Uzumakis that I have, so it will just give me the right amount. And of course, then I can just do like a unique set and get that directly of just the unique values from that bag. But it's quite convenient if you want to push a lot of stuff to a collection. You want to count things that you know are the same, instead of you having to iterate and create your own counter as well. The streams API kinda make that a little bit easier, but in here it's just an API call, which is quite convenient. The next one over there is like a BD map. So this is like a bidirectional map. So I'm pretty sure all of us have that experience where you have a map that has like a key and a value, right? And you want to search by a key, but some occasions you want to search by the value as well. And in those situations, sometimes you have to like create a new map with the bidirectional conversion. Well, with the BD map, you don't have that. So you just create a BD map with whatever, doesn't really matter the order of your key and value. So in this particular case, what I'll do is I'll do a put on 1 for this name Naruto, and then I can say, hey, I want to get 1, so I get it by the ID. But if I want to get it by name, I can just say map inverse BD map, and I'll say get by the name itself. So I'll have just a single map, and I can have like this bidirectional map between keys and values. So it's also quite convenient. And I believe this actually ends the commons. Well, the commons APIs has a lot of other stuff in that. I just try to explore some of the most convenient stuff. So now it's on your end. Just have a look into them and see if you can find something more useful. Do you have any questions about the commons APIs? Okay, if not, I'll just move with something else.
Awesome stuff. Some of them, at least myself, I didn't know it. So that's
Sorry?
nice. Awesome stuff. Some of these things, for instance, this bidirectional map is very useful. I didn't know about it. That's nice.
Well, I mean, then you'll let me happy, because that means that at least one person knew something new. So at least make my time worthwhile being here. And that was the whole point of the presentation, right?
Yeah.
I
Nice, thank you.
Hi, can you, this bidirectional map, you know how is it implemented?
I don't, but I mean, it's open source, so we can have a look over here.
Yeah, yeah. I was curious if it's a double map indeed.
So they actually have like bidirectional maps for a lot of other stuff. So they have like the tree BD map. So you can have a look. They have like a set for key sets, a set for value sets. They have this inverse thing. So just have a look and see how that's implemented.
Nice. For me, it's also new. Didn't know.
Sorry, Roberto. Hi.
Hi.
Could you? I didn't understood very well. What is the point of the tuple?
Oh, the tuple. Yeah. So a tuple is well, let's just say that. Let me try to do something similar over here. So So imagine that you have these class. So let me do like a public static void main over there, right? And you have like a string A. So probably that's not like the best example, B, right? And then you come into a situation where you have these methods where you have like a string do something, right? And you take a string A and string B. But you actually want to return two values from this, right? Instead of doing like this, you want to say, hey, I want to return A plus B. That's probably not a very good example. But I also want to return A plus B plus something else, right? So that's actually impossible, right? You cannot return, a method is only able to return a single value. So usually what you will do is, okay, I want to return two values from this method, so I'm going to create this class string something, and then we'll say string A plus B, right? And then string A plus B plus C, right? And then you'll just come over here and say, okay, now I'm going to return a string something or new string something. And then you pass in whatever values over there, and then yeah, now I have the now I'm able to return two stuff, right? But this requires you to, of course, create a separate class and manage it yourself. Well, with a tuple, you can just instead say, hey, I want to return a tuple. Well, in this particular case, it's just a pair, and I do like return pair. Or return immutable pair, then I can just say I return A and return B, or return A plus B, and then A plus B plus something else, right? And now I don't really have to implement a separate class, and I can have like return methods that return two arguments, right? By using a pair. Pair is just like a shorthand method of a class with two parameters or two fields. Does that make sense?
More or less. I have to check a little more. I will not
Sure.
sure this.
I think it's also useful when you are using maps and you want to this kind of be the key, the spare. So you need a more complex object.
So I mean, every time that you require a complex object, right, that uses two fields, you can use a pair. So if you require an object that requires three fields, you can use a triple. So in reality, what the pair and triple are, they're just shorthand classes for things that you require multiple fields, but you don't have to implement them on your own, right? And because pair and triple, these are generics, they can you can just pass whatever whatever classes or whatever types you want over here. So this is a string, but it can be like a string and an int. So of course.
Sorry, Roberto. Sorry to intervene. A
Yeah.
good example for this would be, imagine that you are using a string and you just want to have some metrics about the syllabus, number of spaces. You could use basically a pair or a triple to have those values returned in the same method.
Sure, definitely.
Just account and have those things calculated on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple cases where you can use that. So the idea is that you can use that in a place where you require multiple fields or multiple information, but you don't have to create the class on your own. You just use the class that's already there.
Okay, thank you very much. I was
No
not
worries.
aware of those ones. I will check tomorrow. Thank you.
My pleasure.
On Java 17, there should be some support for this, does it?
Yes, as I mentioned before, there's been like a long conversation about pushing JDK specific support for these type of classes, but it was always shut down. I'm not sure if it's going to be included on JDK 17. Let's see.
Okay. This is the same as the case switches, something like that, right?
Yeah. Okay, so next one that I like to show is, and I'm a little bit biased on this because that's actually one of the things that I do implement. But this is called, this is the config API or the config libraries. So on config, so every project that we write usually requires some kind of configuration, right? Either because you want to configure the amount of items that show on a page list size, or if you want to configure the language of the application, or if you want to configure whatever thing you have on the app. So the idea with configuration is something that you can put on your app and you can change it in runtime or without restarting, or even if you want to restart, you can restart the application, but doesn't require you to change the code, right? So the application will adapt to whatever configuration you change. And so microprofile config, which is an API they started with, there are plenty libraries to do config. So microprofile config came up with this API to do configuration. And you don't, so microprofile config is just a framework to do a lot of stuff, but microprofile config is able to be used standalone. That's why I brought it over here. And the idea with config is, so in this particular case, what I do, and again, using some annotations, is I create this type safe object called server, right? I say like config mapping server, I say like a host, support, has a couple of converters. I'll show that in a sec. Also has like a couple of maps, a string, logs. So like it has like a lot of other things over there. You see also these annotations called with default. Now, in config, you can set this configuration file, which set up these configurations. Now you're probably seeing a pattern over here, right? So you say, oh, server.host. It means that's going to be mapped to this server host field or host method, right? The same thing for server.port, right? So it will just also going to be mapped like that. Now, if I show you the code, you'll see you can do something like, hey, config provided get config. Over here, it'll say, hey, config get config mapping. You're passing the server class, and this will give you the server interface populated with every value coming from config. So if I run that one, of course, now you'll see if I call like server host, I'll get local host, I'll get server port, I'll get server port. Now you'll notice that I can even use like system properties to override values. So even though if you look here on my properties file, the server port has like this word notation. So this is actually using property replacement. So in this particular case, it will use a port, but it's not, if it's not, it will default to 8080. But now I'm just saying system set property port 1990. So it means that it will just fall back to port, but it's not going to use the default 8080 because I just overridden it by this on 1990. So maybe that was a little bit complicated, but the idea with configuration is you're able to just override any property key using fixed properties, environment variables, and you can even implement your own source to grab the configuration from database, from REST endpoint, whatever. But the idea here is you can set up these nice interface classes, and then you'll just get the value, and you have the configuration on the class, and it will handle all of these converters for you. And if there is no, so it already has like a set of conversions out of the box for the most common things. But if you don't have them, then you can just implement your own converters like I have over here for a duration, and then that's pretty much it. Just set, hey, I want to convert that with this duration converter, and we'll just convert the duration for that timeout. Any questions about config?
Nope.
No, just say, Roberto. Hello.
Yeah.
The automatic translation to optionals is quite useful as well, as you have there.
Yeah, so these also these automatic conversions. So if there is, so it will just look into the properties, and if you'll see if there is any property matching that object, it will just populate the optional. If not, the optional will be empty. So it's quite nice to see if the optional is there or not, or if the configuration is there or not. So you can do things like that. And even on the last version, I introduced something that is something like this. So you can now map like complex objects like this. So it supports like indexed properties. If you want to do collections like that, or if you want to like do things like this, and this will like just map like a complex object on the index number 1. But I haven't put that example over here, but that's not possible as well. So we don't have much time left. So I'm going to show a couple of other things really quick. So this is one of my favorite ones, to be honest. This is called Faker. So the Faker is a very small library that allows you to generate test information. So sometimes you want to just generate some random data, right? And you have to pull your hairs out to try to come up with something, right? So Faker is like a compressive API to generate all kinds of crazy data that you can use for testing. So you want books? That's fine. You can go over there and you can generate 10 books from Faker. So, oh, actually, this just is not right. Let me just print the name. So let me do map book title. Let's see if anyone can recognize any of these book names. So we'll just give you like random books every time. But let me put the author's name. So I thought that the string was just printing everything.
I just know anti-K, but yeah, it's
Oh,
not
sorry.
anymore.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, so if you want books and you want like to bring a bookstore and you want to populate books for testing data, then you can use a Faker to generate books over there, and you have like this really nice API. So you could just say like string generate books, right? And you can like limit to see how many you want to generate. You want to generate 100, and of course this will just generate like a bunch of names. But if you like superheroes like me, you can just generate superhero names as well, and this will just generate like really weird names. Or if you like Dragon Ball like me, you can just generate Dragon Ball character names. But the idea is if you go to Faker, you'll see even for Lorem Ipsum, you can see like you can generate the Lorem Ipsum types of things like that. So it has a lot of generator data, and you can contribute a lot of stuff. So it has Pokemons, have addresses, colors, like Game of Thrones things. So just go over there and find it and use it. So it's quite interesting to generate test data on your test classes if you're out of inspiration to do your own stuff.
This one is nice. I didn't know. Very cool.
Yeah, and of course this is an open source project, so you feel free to generate your own stuff and push it over there. If you're like a Buffy fan as well, you can generate Buffy stuff, like Buffy quotes or Buffy characters, right, or Buffy episode names. So it's like it's quite crazy. So I think I mean I don't want to steal a lot of your time. So the last probably I'm going to show you is test containers. So I want to push some of the I want to show some test stuff as well. For me, test containers kind of revolutionize the way that we do tests. In the sense that, well, all of you probably heard about things like containers, like Docker, and then running things on Kubernetes. Well, why can't we run containers in test as well? So test containers allow you to do that really easily using JUnit. So what I'm showing over here is So this is using the JUnit test containers extension, right? And one of the issues that a lot of people have is, oh, I want to run my own test and I require the database, right? So I have to create like an in-memory database, or I have to have these other database in whatever other DevOps infrastructure right there on my company. Well, usually for databases, having in-memory a database like H2 works just fine. But if you want the real thing, right, you can just say, hey, I want to create a container, and this is actually a Postgres container. And now this is my database. So in this particular case, what I'm doing is the test is going to create a Docker container, or it's going to instantiate a Docker image with a Postgres image. I'm going to connect to it just using regular Java API, creating a table, and then just going a couple of inserts and checking out the data. So you can see that that actually works. So if I run that one, of course, these kind of tests, they take some time because creating the container is not really an instant operation. But of course, you do require Docker running to be able to run these. But you can see what happened over here is a bunch of log coming over here, but that was test containers coming up, creating the Docker image for Postgres, starting up the image, running my test, and in the end, it will just trash the image, so you can start over. This, for instance, is quite nice if you want to, of course, try out like REST APIs that on systems that you don't control. So maybe they can give you like a Docker image of their own application, and you can just run it over here. So you can really have like end-to-end tests on a simple integration test by setting up all the Docker containers or all the Docker images that you require to run whatever test you want. And this one is for REST. So in this particular case, I have, let me open my terminal. Well, never mind. I'm not going to open that. But in here, I have an application that I just wrote. It's a number API, generates a random number. And what I did over here is I'm creating a generic container based on my own Docker image, right? So now I can use it as a container in this test. So now I just run that. And even if I don't have my application running that I'm going to call, I can still create it with Docker image. Of course, it takes a little bit of time, but that's over there, and it was able to actually call localhost and that numbers generate API to get the value back. So I think that's really interesting as well if you want to do another level of testing with more real stuff by using test containers. So there's a couple other things that I may show you, but I think that I don't want to take more time away from you. I want to also take a couple of more minutes for any QA that you might have. So please feel free to give me any other questions. I'll be happy to answer.
All right. Can I? Roberto.
Yeah.
Again, on the faker example you gave us, do you know if that project is able to not return random data so that we can trust on that the data set is always the same, the generated one?
I believe so, because all the data are like indexes as well. So I believe that you can query for a particular index on their data and retrieve that particular item that you like.
Oh, I will investigate. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they have. I know they have some filters as well, so you cannot just apply filters on stuff. So feel free to just investigate and see if that works for you.
It's really cool to avoid lots of code on tests, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another, but if I may ask you, is about the reflection fields you show about in comments. Internally, it's still using reflection, right? There is no
Yes.
way around. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, no, it's still reflection. It's just like you can call it like
A friendly
a
API.
yes, a nice wrapper API around the crappy reflection API.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't know if I can call it a question or a thought regarding these test containers. Can we consider this a good practice to run on JUnit? Because we have other ways that we can use also Docker to start up the containers and test it, for instance, against or Postman, for instance, the Newman CLI, or even the other one from the Swagger company. I don't remember the name. And we can in this way run it as a black box tests.
Well, of course. I mean, there like it depends on how you want to set up your test environment, right? I mean, test container is not like the silver bullet to run tests. It's just like one extra way to do it, right? I won't recommend to use test containers as like simple JUnit tests. I will just move them around for integration tests. But it gives you an option to, as I show you, to use the real thing, right? Even when, for instance, you want to test database stuff, you can rely on things like H2. H2 still, most of the things work when you're doing H2 and then you want to use something on production like Postgres. Most of the queries will work, but they're like slightly different. They might have like uh, slight implications on how you're writing stuff. So the idea is that you can have like the set of tests that you run on H2, and then you can run them again, but with test containers pointing to the actual right thing, right? And the idea is that the test container will just start up the environment and will just trash it in the end, and that's exactly what you want when you're running a test, right?
Yeah. I was referring to SoapUI before, but the thing is, normally we want the JUnits are fast, right?
Yes.
And we can run also the end-to-end tests also in the builds, raising up all the Docker ecosystem. But for instance, the verify in the Maven, for instance, and we can detach the end-to-end or the system tests from the JUnit, and we can, for instance, see it. I know this is an alternative, and maybe in some scenarios it could be useful. But at least for myself, the practice that we've been doing, we separate these tests, and we do it in a black box, for instance, running a Newman collection in the verify, for instance, in the Maven collection, where you can start up the Docker ecosystem after the build is done.
And that's completely fine. So that's actually I recommend to run test container as well. You can run it on failsafe with Maven. So I was running that on the IDE, but if you're running, so these also all the things that I show over here, it's like it's a Maven project, and that reminds me. So I'm gonna paste here on the chat the link for that GitHub repo, so you can play with that. But you're completely right. I mean, everyone has their own ways to do the testing. I'm not saying that you should move to test containers and do something else. It's just another tool that I find really useful when I want to like run a test with a couple of containers without too much setup, right? It's really easy to set up over there.
One of the tests that normally this is good. For instance, I have some tests also with Derby and H2 databases in memory. But for instance, when you use JPA, these H2 and Derby tests, for instance, they passed, and you for instance, lazy loading issues are not are not addressed in this test. So when you do the same test on a Docker container, for instance with Postgres or another database, you hit some problems that you did not hit on the in-memory database. That's good, for instance, when you have some questions or some issues regarding, for instance, the query statements, and you can catch them quickly. But there are other issues that you can only catch them in the real scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of my recommendations. You can use H2 to run them as like simple JUnit tests really fast, and then you can run the exact same tests on integration in the integration phase, but instead pointing to the container running Postgres, and then you'll get the best of two worlds, right?
Exactly, and the feedback is different, right? So the unit are more fast, and the other ones take more, but they're both important because they
Exactly.
give you quality standards.
Yes, exactly. So I just pasted on the chat the link for the libraries that for the repo that I just showed. So I'm not sure if there are any other questions that anyone would like to ask.
Yeah, will this be possible to start this container mapping a previous dump of a database, for example?
Yeah, for sure. So it is a Postgres in the end, right? So you'll just have to configure the container image of Postgres to read whatever dump you have and start it up like that, right? So whatever option you're allowed to do at the Docker container level, you're able to do it on test containers as well, because that's just running Docker under the covers, right? So as far as I remember, the Docker image for Postgres has a couple of options where you can just start up from another database or start up from a dump. So you're definitely able to do that as well from test containers. The only probably downside is depending on your dump it might take a little longer to bootstrap your test.
Okay, thanks.
Roberto, I have
Yeah.
another question regarding the test containers.
Sure.
By your experience, do you used to have the test containers running on the Jenkins pipeline?
Yeah.
For integrated tests and stuff like that.
Yes, I mean if you go with test containers, they'll just be part of your test infrastructure and your test code. So it's just a way to set up some additional service instead of you having to mock them or to use other stuff, right?
And is there any way to customize the Docker registry that they will get the images? Do you know that? Have you ever like did?
Yes,
something?
I mean so again, test containers. The only thing that does is just an API around Docker.
Oh, I see.
That runs Docker under the
I see.
covers.
Yeah. So you have just to change your registry on Docker, right?
Exactly. So you haven't seen that, but to run test containers, you have to have the Docker. You have to have Docker running on your box, right?
Okay.
Or at least have a Docker sock available to connect to Docker. So the only thing that test containers does is when he picks up the metadata that you have, he will just say, "Hey Docker, I want to start this image," and but instead of course using the command, it will just use the Docker API to send the exact same commands you will do if you wanted to type them on your terminal.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Okay, if we don't have anything else, I would like to thanks everyone to joining us today. It was really great to see that many people over here, and I hope that you enjoyed the first presentation of 2021. And the idea is that we're gonna keep doing them. We hope every 2 months. So I already created the next session. It's gonna happen in April. So I haven't published that yet, but we're gonna have someone that already been with us a couple of times. It's Steven Shin. So he proposed to me that he wanted to come here and talk to our jug. And of course, we like to hear about Steven Chin. So he's going to talk to us a little bit on what he's been doing. And let me just paste the link. I'm just going to announce that a little bit in a sec. But I'm going to post that link in the chat as well. But basically, he's going to talk to us about DevOps tools for Java developers, which I think is quite nice. So that's a link for the meetup. So if you're interested in those kind of topics, feel free to join. And that's actually going to happen in the April 6th. So without any further delay, thank you so much for joining. Sign up for the next session. Follow us on JNation, see what news that we are going to have for JNation 2021. And feel free to reach us out if you have any other question. So thank you so much for joining and see you next time.
Thank you, Roberto.
Okay.
See ya.
Thank you.
See ya. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Roberto.
Bye
Bye.
everyone. Bye bye.